Well, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. I'd acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands upon which we meet today, especially the Darkinjung speaking people of the Central Coast Council area and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I extend my respect to elders past and present and to all future cultural knowledge holders. This meeting is being recorded and webcast, and you're encouraged to bear this in mind when choosing what to say. There's to be no other recording or filming of this meeting unless prior permission of the panel has been obtained. The panel's decisions from the meeting and audio recording should be available on Council's website ordinarily well within 7 days from this meeting. I just ask everyone now to please turn your electronic devices to silent and ensure that you're free from any interruptions. So just to introduce the panel members for the meeting today, there's myself, Cara Crayson, as chair, and we have two expert professional panel members, Sue Francis and Grant Christmas, and the nominated community panel member, Tony Tuxworth. There are no apologies for today's meeting. So in terms of the development applications that the meeting will consider today, we only have one item on the agenda, and that's agenda item 3.1, DA 61806/2021 for 75 Brick Wharf Road, Woy Woy, and it's a residential flat building comprising 6 units. Now, the panel has been provided with assessment reports prepared by council staff, as well as public submissions on the applications. A site orientation and briefing session has also been undertaken. Council staff have briefed the panel on key issues that the applications raise. Now, in terms of public representations and representations from the applicant, today we have the following people registered to address the panel. The first speaker will be Erin Kelly against the recommendation, and the second registered speaker is Ravi Sharma for the recommendation, and he's the applicant's representative. So I'd just like to welcome everyone. And in terms of process, we will hear from the speakers on this only agenda item first, and then we will hear from the applicant's representative. Our usual practice is to allow individual members of the public 3 minutes to speak on the matter, and that time could be extended with the agreement of the panel, should it be required. Once members of the public have spoken, the applicant will be given a maximum speaking time of 15 minutes to respond should they wish to. As the panel has been provided with copies of all submissions received in response to the DA, there's no need to repeat all of the points made in those submissions. I'd also ask that each speaker be heard in silence while they are addressing the panel, and that courtesy and respect be observed throughout the meeting. There's to be no personal criticism directed at any speaker or council staff. Any such criticism will be contrary to the panel's code of conduct and will not be accepted. Such criticism also adds nothing to the process of considering the matters at hand. Panel members may ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of what is being said. And after hearing from speakers, the panel may ask questions of council officers to clarify the matters raised. After hearing from the speakers, the panel will adjourn the meeting to confer. If we were meeting in person, we might then reconvene the meeting to hand down our decisions. But given this is an electronic meeting, we will instead seek to have the panel's decisions up on council's website as soon as possible. At the conclusion of the adjournment, we may decide to either make a decision on the matter, or if more information is required by the panel, the decision may be deferred either for a further public meeting or to be dealt with electronically. So we'll start with agenda item 1.1, that's declarations of interest. I just remind panel members of the requirements in the code of conduct for panel members about conflict of interest declarations. So no written conflicts of interest have been received. I'll just now also ask, does any member of the panel have a declaration of interest which has not previously been made?
No.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is a confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. So the minutes of the panel's meeting of the local planning panel held on the 11th of May 2023, which were endorsed by the chair of that meeting, have been submitted for noting. We can now move on to agenda item 3, the development application in the public meeting, which is agenda item 3.1. So the first speaker that we have registered is Erin Kelly. So Erin, you've got about 3 minutes to speak. I did note that the intro notes also didn't include something that we normally say, which is that the panel doesn't ask you for your address. Obviously, we have written submissions. Sometimes members of the public like to disclose their address, but there's no requirement to do that. So it's completely up to you whether you want to disclose that or not, but we don't require it. So over to you when you're ready.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to speak today as well. Look, I am a privileged member of a resident of Brickwolf Road. Brickwolf Road is a historic and one of the most unique streets on the Central Coast. It is home to the historic war memorial, which was unveiled in 1925, heritage pines with the 1920s cottages, and it's made up of unique block sizes. Because of this uniqueness, there are blocks a mere 6.5 metres wide, and the average single dwelling block width is around 10 to 12 metres. These properties have been held in families for decades, and any recent redevelopments or renovations have all been single dwellings. I would like to again raise my concerns and voice the concerns of residents who oppose this development. Since the 1980s, larger blocks have been redeveloped with units. These developments have taken into consideration the uniqueness of the street, with the majority keeping the iconic pitch in their roof lines, and they've also provided ample green spaces that go along with that beautiful waterfront of Woy Woy. This development does not meet the design quality principles 1 and 2, as the design has not considered the local context or reflect the current or future state of Brickwolf Road, which will remain single dwellings due to the narrow allotments and the current unit complexes that are there. They're not held under one title, so there'll be little to no redevelopment of these units in the near future. The application compares this development to units on Oval Road, Blackwall Road and Railway Street. These are not unique streets, and they do not have this historical significance or community draw card that Brickwolf Road has. This unit complex will not be leading the way in the redevelopment of this street as they suggest in their application. Instead, it will be a large concrete box that will stand out like a sore thumb. It would dwarf our historic war memorial and our heritage listed pines. It will also overshadow the 6.5 metre wide neighbouring allotment at 77 Brickwolf Road, where there is a quaint original cottage currently stands, and those occupants use their vegetable garden every single day. The development is 3 stories and it's still over height, even when given the generous allowable height of 11 metres. The shadow diagrams that they're actually not current, as they do not reflect the new single dwelling that was built at 79 Brickwolf Road last year. The development encroaches boundary limits. It does not meet the floor space ratio by 8.9%. It is increasing impervious areas on an already waterlogged block, which doesn't align with council recommendations in the flood mitigation plan. The rear parking cannot be accessed without driving through flood waters during king tides. Their plan for green space is pretty much a border of plants around concrete. The communal area is quite questionable as it's in a corridor between apartments, and the covered area potentially for bins at the front of the property is on the boundary line next to the footpath, and it will take away from the streetscape. The developer is asking council to overlook a number of planning requirements instead of reducing the size and scale of their development. To meet these requirements, or because of more appropriate development would not be financially viable. I'm asking on behalf of the community members who voiced their concerns through the portal to not overlook the community and take into account the unique and historic street that is Brickwolf Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Did you have enough time for your address there?
Yes, I cut it down.
Okay, great.
I do have to jump into a meeting though, so I apologise. I can't stay
no, that's okay.
Today.
And I apologise for the technical issues at the beginning of the meeting. So thank you for your address.
No, thank you for your time.
I'll
really
just
appreciate
ask quickly,
it.
If any of the panel members have any specific questions of you.
Not for me, Chair.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much, Erin.
No, thank you all. See you.
Okay, so then we move on to the next speaker, Ravi. So as the applicant's representative, as you know, you have up to 15 minutes should you need it. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and fellow panellists. Thanks for the opportunity to speak before you in regards to the residential flat building proposal presented before everyone this afternoon. I'm the town planner acting on behalf of the new owner of the site, Mr. Tony Borg. Firstly, I'd like to say that both myself and the designer, Mr. David Rowe from Howard Leslie and Associates, local practitioners who know the Woolooware area quite intimately. We've grown up in the area, and I actually attended Woy Public School and have had friends in Brickwolf Road. And now when after all these years, I take my 7-year-old daughter for a bike ride along Brickwolf Road, along the cycle track from Fisherman's Wharf along around to Burge Road along the waterfront. I come back and look at the area, and the austere residential development along the street is screaming for urban renewal. There's a lot of older housing stock in the street that somewhat presents a monolithic and austere context presentation. And the RFP before us actually is considered a breath of fresh air in this context, I believe. The street has a superb outlook, I acknowledge that, to the north and overlooking the waterfront reserve over Brisbane Water. It is therefore deserved that it warrants a well-designed residential development that takes in advantage of this inherent context that we all appreciate. Again, the proposal has been meticulously planned and designed and documented on how it affords a contemporary RFP that is considered to somewhat an overachievement in terms of the presentation to the public domain along the street and the neighbouring sites when compared to the typical medium density housing topologies that have recently been constructed and approved on the periphery of the Woolway Town Centre with a gun barrel sort of townhouse design with minimal landscaping flanking the built form. Rather, this design provides a greater landscaping opportunities and alleviates traffic and parking access to Brickwolf Road. It takes advantage of the re-access that's been established for residents along this stretch, and it allows the established native canopy, tree canopy with the box gums out the front to be retained. It allows one to obtain views, solar access and accessibility and cross ventilation to accommodate ageing in place for the occupants of each dwelling. It must be said the site is benefited by being within close proximity of the Woolway Town Centre, and that from a strategic perspective, the local strategic planning statement classifies Woolway as a strategic centre for a key growth centre, So one of the aims of the strategic statement is to support population growth, housing growth, and emphasises revitalisation of the Woolway Town Centre and housing within the periphery of the centre. If anyone knows the history of Woolway, it's somewhat a bit stagnant, and after decades, it's becoming a little bit commercial. Vitality and diversity is lacking. So it's noted that housing renewal of the site would accord with this statement, as well as the recently published Woolway Waterfront Master Plan that's seeking an upgrade of the urban design along the precinct and within the public sphere along the waterfront, from the Bayview pub down to the Lions Park. So in regards to the LEP and DCP compliances, we acknowledge there's some minor numerical variation sought. However, it's noted that the proposal meets the aims and objectives of the relevant plan controls, and this assessment has actually been a rigorous 2-year process that must acknowledge Council's balanced approach and rigorous approach in assessing this application. It's been very difficult, and but at the end of the day, they finally believe that the proposal concurs with the requirements of the objectives of the planning controls, relevant planning controls, and the RFP warrants approval. So I thank you for your time this afternoon, and yeah, once again, I believe this would be a benefit to the area in regards to providing a new benchmark in residential housing that's in acute demand.
Okay, thank you for your address, Mr. Sharma. I'll open it up to the panel members to ask any questions of you. Anyone have any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'll just ask one question, Chair.
Mhm.
Mr. Sharma, you said I've just been looking at the streetscape, and I was quite surprised when you said the built form's quite monolithic. I actually thought it was quite low density and quite passive. Where are the structures that you say are monolithic?
I don't know the addresses, but I know the street intimately, and I'll look at some of the probably circa 1970s RFB developments, brick and tile. I can give you those addresses, but there's certainly a few in the street that we can provide. I have to look up.
I mean, I'm looking at the street now, and I can see some brick and tile. They're lower scale, they're lower height, they're less intrusive, I would have said. They're of a different era, I get that, but I wanted to know whether there was anything I'd missed, because I don't recall seeing monolithic structures.
Okay, again, on notice, I would have to give you
No,
those.
I just wondered if there was
There's
something
certainly-
particular.
Certainly there that like I said, I probably once a fortnight I go down that stretch, and there are some very austere circa 70s residential flat buildings that are there. Even dwelling houses, some dwelling houses, they're quite bulky and mansion style. It's a very eclectic mix. I can attest in regards to what's been established.
Okay, I mean, I don't need you to find them. I just wondered if there was something particular.
Yeah, look,
you'd mentioned, but whilst I'm here and I'm asking questions, I am concerned about why is it that you think it's appropriate to increase the GFA on the site?
okay, in regards to the exceedance of 50 square metres, essentially, as outlined in the 4.6 and concurred in Council's report, this additional floor area, isn't a grab for additional occupancy or unit yield. It's simply to provide, internal accessible curtilage for the units that are more comfortable. And I believe unit 3 and 4 are designed to be adaptable to allow to meet the premises standards. And in light of that minor, I guess, departure would afford that ability to provide those units, those areas, those circulation spaces are typically tight and difficult. And yeah, that's the crux of the departure. I could go on.
I say this in the context of, I know it's not GFA, but on the ground floor, you've got the internal corridor, not GFA. I accept that technically it's not GFA, but it does push the building to the boundaries, and the boundaries don't comply with the required ADG separation. How does that work?
Yeah, in light of the width of the lot, the size of the lot, it's very difficult to provide, 6 units that would be typical, I guess, GFA, and therefore pushes out the width. We've got the ability to provide parking at the back, so we've done that, and provide appropriate sweep paths to comply with AS 2898.1 off-street parking, and therefore it sort of pushes the setbacks to some degree laterally.
Isn't it your internal corridors that you're excluding as GFA? Isn't it the design and the need for 6 units, as you said, that is pushing it to the boundaries?
The corridors allow accessible persons with disabilities to access the building and to provide appropriate circulation spaces without impediment, and that's now a standard that's highly sort of.
I don't know that the
regarded.
not including it as GFA makes any difference from it being accessible.
Well,
And what I'm trying to understand is, we're over the GFA, we have a design which excludes GFA, which corridors are normally, GFA, a circulation space. They're not included. We don't comply with the setbacks. I'm wondering why that's reasonable.
In regards to the built form that can be proposed in another typology, say if it was a two-storey development, two-storey typical RFB building, the setbacks would be much greater. We're not, I acknowledge that it's assessed under the SEP 65 guidelines, or our residential flat building guidelines, and privacy elements and setbacks. However, we're just over in regards to coming under that scrutiny. And if there was another typology that could be pursued, a townhouse development with a gun barrel driveway, we could go 0.9 to the ground floor to 4.5 metres, and then probably the upper floor, if it was around the 8.5, you're looking at 1.9 metres. So it could afford, it could be a dual lot, it could be a 3-unit development that could be pursued on this site, or maybe 4, and with a much greater impact. So in light of, I guess, the scale and the bulk, and it's been scrutinised in terms of amenity impacts, in terms of privacy outlooks, and in terms of shadowing, visual bulk and scale. There's been a lot of elements and design work in regards to, I guess, alleviating amenity impacts to the neighbouring sites. Obviously, as you can see, there's been a lot of work going in regards to providing a well-articulated, modulated presentation to the public domain of the street, with generous setbacks to the front facade, broken by decks and screening and horizontal, vertical elements, landscaping. Again, we're providing parking to the rear, which allows the retention of landscaping and the established trees within the streetscape. So all these factors come into the design in regards to presenting a development, although slightly over on the GFA. The impacts from that departure are considered minor, if not negligible, and again, this is quite a as the other speaker noted, quite a well-established site in regards to the amenity that's afforded by being a waterfront, across the waterfront. So it regards to the getting 6 units in, it's not you can easily see that the departure is not purely for additional yield, and in light of, I guess, the capitalisation of the site, it's warranted that 6 units would be acceptable, and it has to be economically feasible. We've already lost, during the course of this assessment, the previous applicant has had to depart the scene because the holding costs were too much, and so fortunately, I guess the DA survived by someone else coming in to purchase the site and inherit this DA. So, and to be honest, even he's struggling because of the interest rates and land costs and labour rates, etc., struggling to make it economically viable. The alternative outcome would be a standard three to 4 bedroom townhouse development would be a far inferior outcome, I believe, from a planning perspective.
Thank you for that answer. Is that enough information in relation to that question, Sue?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Did you have any other questions of Mr. Sharma? No.
Madam Chair, can I just ask one question about the building that's the status of the building on the site? The application was made for the demolition of the building and for the construction of a residential flat building. Have you amended your application? It appears that the building's been demolished.
Demolished.
Oh, no, but obviously it's that could be easily be updated to state simply, you know, the erection or construction of a residential flat building. I believe it was removed lawfully during the course of.
I'm not asking that. I'm just asking, you've made a number of, you've resubmitted the application on a number of occasions. I'm not sure when the building was demolished. You have it. I was just checking to see if you have amended the application to delete reference to the demolition of the house.
No,
Thank you.
no, it hasn't been resubmitted. Like the DA has been all one DA.
Yeah. But you've
Yeah.
resubmitted plans on a number of occasions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
No, that's
some-
okay. It's a yes or no answer, and that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant, have you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the clause 4.6 requests, so there's two. One in relation to the height. Now, as I understand it, that's in relation to the lift overrun. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct?
It's the I think it's the fins.
That's what I thought. But then looking at the plans, actually, it seems to show that it's the lift overrun.
Perhaps we'll go to Mr. Sharma for a response, and if he can't clarify it, then we'll go to council officers.
Yes, both correct in saying that there is a departure, and that entails just the tip of the flyover roof eaves, and by I believe 300 millimetres, and the lift overrun by similar.
Okay. I was just what caught my attention was whether if it was just the roof that provision in the LEP about an architectural roof feature may be able to be used. So I'm not particularly concerned about the request in respect to the clause 4.6 for the height, but in respect to the floor space ratio, I sort of struggle as to the justification. I mean, in my mind, there are two main tests for clause 4.6 requests. Firstly, that compliance with the development standards unreasonable or unnecessary. I listened closely to what you had in answer to Stu Francis's questions, and I'm just struggling with, I suppose, the reasoning. Why is it that compliance with the standards are unreasonable or unnecessary in this case? And secondly, I'm not quite sure, and I don't think it's clear from your written requests, what are the environmental planning grounds that make non-compliance satisfactory?
Okay, in regards to the first point, not being, I guess, unreasonable or unnecessary, I should say, is that, as I said, it's within the C and outlined in Council's planning assessment report that the bulk of the building is somewhat appropriately sort of mitigate and articulate in regards to design. The proposed exceedance, it doesn't warrant increase in intensity or in terms of additional units. It allows more generally proportion units above the minimum unit size that's required by the ADG. The units exceed the minimum size required by the ADG. Doesn't have any unreasonable amenity impacts in results to with the additional floor space. It's the upper floor, it's transitional, it's tiered in, and it would be acceptable in regards to providing that additional floor space, given, I guess, the nature of the site and the additional, well, the fact that the internal amenity is adheres to, I guess, the objectives of the ADG without affording amenity impacts to the public domain and to the surrounding sites. And that's outlined, obviously, provided with the architectural plans are presented, the 3D montages, and the shadow diagrams that are being provided.
All right. So is the primary argument that compliance with the standards unreasonable or unnecessary, or both?
Okay, going to the second point, that there's environmental reasonings behind it. In regards to the site itself being located in close proximity to the foreshore and having a high acid sulfate soil classification, in accordance with the LEP, if we could get a basement in, and which we, RFBs quite often do, and then have all parking, obviously the objective behind that is to have all parking concealed, so that you've got a presentation as we have now of all units fronting the streetscape, mitigating the hard stand surface or the access to the road is a plus as well. So not only don't we have a driveway going to the street to the site, we don't have the additional environmental impacts that would be afforded with soil removal and dumping, and obviously, if that was the case, if we could get a basement in accordance with the LEP provision, you would be entitled to a 0.7 to 1 floor space ratio. Because of the environmental constraint, we're not able to do that in regards to, due to the acid sulfate soil classification and the low water table. So we reverted back to 0.6. Notwithstanding, we don't have the ability to get to 0.7 because we can't get a basement in. It presents to the street as parking not presented to the street, and it doesn't have a driveway accessing Brickwolf Road. So it meets the intent without having a basement. So that's a benefit. So there's an environmental constraint that we can't get to that provision of 0.7, which is in the LEP. So that is an argument in regards to, from an environmental perspective, there's a constraint there that doesn't allow us to achieve what was the intent for GFA on the site. However, we still achieve the intent of what the rationale is behind having a basement for the apartment design.
Okay. That's the only questions I had, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks, Grant. Just staying on the FSR issue, I know we saw some clarification from council in the assessment report. It talks about GFA or FSR diagrams, compliance diagrams being submitted, and we've been provided with a copy of those, and also a clarification on whether those diagrams show whether the circulation space and those corridors were counted as GFA, and as Sue Francis indicated, we understand that it looks like you've proposed some kind of louver screens on the ground floor, so that there's so technically it wouldn't be counted as GFA. But the other aspect related to the garages, noting that you're providing additional parking additional to what the council requirements are, and as per the definition, you would need to include any parking that is additional or count that as GFA. Now, I understand that your justification has been that you want to use 2 double garages at the rear of the site as potentially accessible garages, where you would only have 1 vehicle in there instead of 2, but noting that the dimensions for an accessible garage is less than a double garage. So I just wonder what your response is, whether you have calculated that at parking GFA that's additional beyond the adaptable garage size as part of your GFA for the purpose of calculating FSR, or has that currently been excluded?
I believe that it probably wouldn't have been would have been calculated as GFA. I think the double garage in its entirety would have been, I guess, presented as providing access for a person with a disability for that parking accommodation.
Okay. My other question relates to the roof gardens, which are on the first floor of the 2 apartments at the rear. So they sit, there's 2 of them, that they adjoin neighbouring properties, and they sit on top of, I guess, a single garage each. And they immediately adjoin an outdoor area with a drying area to service the apartments that they are accessed from. How does the design propose access for the residents of those apartments to maintain those rooftop gardens, weeding, cutting back dead parts, all of that sort of thing? I mean, I assume there could be some kind of irrigation system to water, but how is the maintenance aspect proposed? Because I note that there are no privacy screens then. If they were to be accessible for maintenance purposes, then you've got obviously increased opportunity for overlooking from those spaces into the adjoining properties.
I'd say the body corporate would have to come into effect there to maintain those. If not, the residents would be, as in the bylaws, required to maintain those gardens.
But how do you deal with any privacy aspects of residents if they
And also, how do you get up there?
Yeah, well, I guess they could get up there if their deck didn't have, if it had a gate or something from the deck, then they could get through. But I guess we're asking you the questions. What does the design allow for?
Yeah, I'd have to take that on notice and talk to the designer. I don't know if he's available in regards to practicalities of that, but yeah, there'd have to be some kind of gate or some access there for them to maintain those gardens.
And I understand that those structures through the design development phase, in response to council's concerns, you have, while still not compliant, you have slightly pulled back those garages from the boundary. There is an overshadowing impact associated with each of them. Did you contemplate whether those parking spaces could be open stand spaces or more lightweight structures instead, to what impact that might have on preserving some solar access to the adjoining property rear yards?
That would be one for David as well, but from initially, yes, correct, Madam Chair, in regards to the garages were on boundary initially, and council's architect, there was a point where it wasn't supported. So we pulled them back to allow obviously access and for maintenance and some landscaping around those structures. That was acknowledged that the parking structures were consistent with parking structures that were established within the rear setbacks of all the lots, or the majority of the lots within Brick Wharf Road along that stretch. There was no discussion in relation to maybe an alternative lightweight open structure to be considered for parking accommodation. So we just simply obviously liaise with council's planner and architect, and we came to a point where the offset to the side boundaries were accepted for the garages.
Okay.
Sorry, I do have one question, Chair, if you finished, but only if you finished.
Yeah, I've got one more question. But
No, you go.
Is it a design question, Sue? Because my question's not to do with design.
Mine's to do with shadows.
No, you go then.
I'm struggling to understand your shadow diagrams. They purport to have no more shadow coming from a 3-story structure than the single-story structure on the site.
Again, this would have been modelled by the designer.
No, I appreciate that, but you're the only person I've got to talk to, and you're the planner, and so am I. And I'm reading the shadow diagrams, and I just don't understand them.
I don't know if David's available to speak to that. Again, it's all modelled through the computer system, and it produces in regards to the height and the elevation of the proposed structure to the I guess the elevation of the sun during the.
Well, I know how one produces a shadow diagram. My question is to you: do they look right? Because you've got no shadow caused by a 3-story structure greater than the single-story structure that's currently on the site, according to these shadow diagrams.
Yeah.
Well,
do you think that's right?
Looking at them, when you're looking at the single-story structures, I guess from the point of where they're taken, like obviously they're further to the north, then the length of the shadow would be. I'm looking at June, for example, June the 21st at 9:30 a.m. When you look at the shadowing by the adjoining site, you can see they're shorter, much shorter than the shadowing from the RFB building and the single-story garages that spill out into the back, the car park. So if you look at sheet DA,
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
DA04, DA4.
Ravi, if you look at the legend and it's blue, proposed shadows, they're showing that none of the proposed shadows go beyond the site boundaries. But
apparently the existing ones do.
That must be all the fences. But it doesn't make sense. But I've never seen a shadow diagram like this where the boundary stops all of the shadows from going beyond a fence which is much lower height than a 3-story building. So do you see what's been asked here? Is it a layer on the plan?
Yeah, I think it's just a layering thing. I acknowledge what you're saying, that it would spill over at that height, but the delineation is in regards to, I'd have to speak to David about that. Yeah, I can see it's got the extent of the shadowing, but the blue, yes, there might be just some kind of computer thing.
It's just hard to see what's existing and recognizing that. I mean, I think from one of the plans it's showing that it was developed when the existing building had been demolished as well. So obviously from the current situation, but the proposed just doesn't look accurate.
Yep. Okay. So no clarity there.
We can provide sort of further embellishment in relation to that, but overall, we can see that what the shadowing would be from the development.
Well, I think that's the point. We can't.
You can see which areas would be in shadow. You just can't work out what's existing and what's proposed. Like what the additional shadow impact is can't be worked out.
Yeah, we can provide obviously clarification on separate plans maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it seems to be a layering issue with the software that's being used, probably, like as Ravi's indicated, that you can sort of see where the shadows would be, but we just don't know what the extent of the additional impact is. All right. Did anyone have any further design questions before I move on to another question? No, okay. So the next matter, just to ask you about, Ravi's, relates to a question that came up in the briefing. And that was just clarifying, you might know the answer to this, and council's been looking into this as well. But obviously, as you said, the application's been going for more than 2 years, as was lodged more than 2 years ago. And presumably you've been on that journey that whole time. So you might know what discussions have occurred, but it relates to two aspects really. One is, has landowners' consent been granted by council to access the proposed parking area at the rear of the site from the adjacent council car park? And when that technical question has been asked to the officers, they've had a look at it and they couldn't see anything on record with this application that there's been any consent granted in relation to that at this stage. And the second aspect of this is then, so obviously that's landowners' consent for the lodgement of the application. The second aspect is the demonstration of any legal right of access from that adjacent car park, noting that it's community land. So do you have any response to those two pieces of information?
Okay, yes, in regards to access to the rear of the site, back before we even prepared the DA, we had a pre-DA meeting, council, including council's manager, the development engineers, and this matter was discussed categorically. And before we even proceeded, we received advice after his discussions with, I guess it would be the property section in council, that there was no objection to obtain vehicular access to the site for the proposed RFB development. So we proceeded and lodged the DA. It was not in the minutes of the pre-DA advice that was provided that we required the owner's consent from council to obtain for the application for the Part B owner's consent. And this is the first we've been asked this question. It's news to us that this is required. As you're aware from your site visit, and just by looking at, obviously for aerial photography, that all those lots along Brick Wharf Road have garages backing onto the site to obtain access from the rear. So in light of, I guess, the advice we got from council initially, in a formal pre-DA, we proceeded without any concern or consideration that this would be required.
You mentioned that the pre-DA minutes don't specifically call out that you've got to get the consent, but does it list that matter was discussed at the pre-DA?
I believe so, yes. Yes.
Okay. It's something that we could ask council to have a look at, find the minutes of those. Perhaps, Elsa, if we could just ask also what council's process is. I know some councils, when they receive applications such as this, the consent of council's property section comes through the referral process once the application has been submitted. But I'm not sure if every council does it the same way, and how Central Coast does it.
Yeah, that's, can you hear me?
Yes.
That would be the process. We have a DART process. They do the pre-DAs and they bring in the DAs. I think in this circumstance, engineers sit on that process when the DA comes in, and due to the historic advice, I suppose, and also from the pre-DA, it was the notes on the site visit suggest that the access is applicable, is allowed through the council car park. At the time, they didn't raise, it was missed, I think, in regards to the owner's consent to access through the council car park.
Okay, so if that hasn't been provided, is that something that would still, there's still a process available within council to seek that consent from the property section? Is that how it would work?
Yes, we'd get the consent from the property section.
Okay. Now, in terms of, so that's obviously for the submission of the application, and then, you know, assuming that there's landowner's consent is issued for the lodgement of the application, then it moves on to their being able to demonstrate that there is a legal right of access from that adjacent car park, and I guess with some certainty, etc. And we can all see that obviously there's existing car garages and parking pretty much on almost every lot along there. But we're also informed that the council car park is community land, and we sought some clarification on whether the plan of management specifically allows for that access. So that's something perhaps, Elsa, I'm not sure if where you've got to in terms of whether there's been enough time at this stage for council to look into that plan of management to see if there's any clarity in relation to that, or whether that's something that takes longer.
We have started to look into it as it was raised. The matter was, I think we initially thought it would take a signature, so yes, but since looking into it further, it's going to take a little bit longer than just getting more information required from the property section before I could probably give a full answer to that one.
Okay. Does any of the other panel members have anything that they wish to question or add in relation to that? I know, Tony, that was something that you raised originally. So whether there's anything that I missed in paraphrasing that question.
No, I don't think so. Okay. The issue always with access over community land is difficult. That's why I'm very familiar with the site. Been there many times, Brick Wharf Road and the car park. But when you look at the map, it's community land. So I don't know, we'll just have to leave it with council to provide that advice.
Yeah. So yeah, Mr. Sharma, I mean, I appreciate this is now coming up a couple of years after obviously the application has been lodged, but if the panel was of a mind to approve the application, we would need to, if there isn't any, I guess, legal right of access, would need to understand that there is a process and that there is certainty that can actually be achieved because the design relies on that being provided. It's being designed with that in mind to be able to access the car parking area. I don't have any further questions. Is there anything else that's popped up that anybody would like to add? No. Okay. So that then concludes our address from speakers in relation to item 3.1. So I would now like to formally close this meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. I'd like to thank all of those who attended and took part, including my fellow panel members, members of the community, representatives of the applicants and council staff. And this part of the meeting will close. And if I can ask the panel to reconvene in the separate link at 3:15, so in 10 minutes' time. Does that suit everyone?